I don't treat my project as products that in which I just want to achieve certain objective and then it's done. It's almost like a living organism that I coexist with. I try different things with it. I add elements to it. I remove it. I kind of enhance it with experiences that I gain parallelly in my life. It's a intensive relationship that I have with the piece.
Hello, Jacek. How are you?
Hello, Carlo. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. So happy to have you on the show.
Happy to be.
And I have to start with one question, Jacek.
Tell me.
Your last name, how you pronounce it, and where is it from? Where are you originally from?
It's Jacek Markusiewicz. It's a Polish surname. I admit I didn't think it through very well when I was choosing my artistic name, which is basically the abbreviation of my surname, which is already difficult to pronounce. I even removed the vowels to make it even harder, and it's tough. I know it's tough because when I meet someone from the space in real life, it's always like when I introduce myself, they have no idea who I am. So I usually take out my phone and I show them my work. Hey, here I'm the Hollow guy. I'm originally from Poland.
Originally from Poland, but you live in Spain these days, right?
Yes, I live in the north of Spain, the Basque country, in San Sebastian.
Right, we aren't so far away from each other. It's 5-6 hour drive.
You live in La Coruña, no?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, in La Coruña.
We share a beautiful ocean coast and rain. A lot of rain.
Yeah, but it's been getting better. To be honest, now it's actually pretty sunny. And it's January. It's January. It's not typical. So the weather. I mean, I have no problem. I have no problem with the weather here in the north. And Jacek, how did you end up in the Basque country?
Mm-hmm. So, well, I lived here for 5 years already. The reason is very simple. My husband is from San Sebastian, and that's how I ended up here. So in fact we met when I was doing my master's studies in Barcelona. We started working together there. We lived in Warsaw for some time, and then we set up a small company here in San Sebastian. That was 5 years.
And I think when we met in real life, I think it was in Valencia, in Spain. Yeah, you mentioned you work in a company, and you were mixing your time in the company and your creative art, your generative art. So, what is this company about? Because you're an architect. Can you tell us a bit about what you do besides
maybe
art?
I will give you a little bit of my background. Like right now, I'm working full time on my art, but my background I think tells quite a lot about how I got here. So I started studying architecture in 2003 in Warsaw. I realized that it was 20 years ago already. And after graduating it was at the Warsaw University of Technology. Then I left for Barcelona when I pursued my master's studies. That was quite a turning point in my life, because apart from meeting my husband, also professionally, I kind of changed my attitude towards architecture. There I met some really really awesome people. Had amazing teachers, particularly one teacher in Barcelona. Do you know Luis Fraguada? You know Luis Fraguada?
Yes, Luis. I know he's also an artist, right?
He was my teacher at IaaC Barcelona. Like when I went there, I already had a certain background in coding, but it was the moment when I kind of make the link between creating architecture, designing architecture, and my interest in say algorithmic approach to things. So I was introduced properly to something that's called parametric design in architecture. I got to have some practice in it, and I discovered I can apply mathematical and algorithmic logic to creative processes.
And Can you tell us a bit about parametric design, Jacek, for those that are
Yeah,
familiar?
okay. So parametric design is a pretty wide concept. It encompasses everything from the use of custom algorithms for automating certain parts of design process, like generation of complex geometries, optimizing certain elements of a building using algorithms and parameters. And it goes all the way to a sort of philosophy of designing not by arbitrarily deciding on where to place a wall, a window, but shaping certain algorithmic rules that are behind the logic of architectural form, and from that generating architecture.
Okay, and is this way of working very common among architects these days?
I wouldn't say so. I would say it's still a bit of a niche. So today's use of computational tools in general, I would say it's mainly using architects using a digital version of a drafting board. So basically, we still draw plans and sections, but instead of using a pencil and a ruler, we are using programs like AutoCAD. There are also other movements like building information modeling, famous BIM, which is like a system in which we model buildings, but where every element of the model represents an architectural element supplemented with architectural information, manufacturer, physical properties, price even. But
Okay.
parametric design goes a little bit beyond that. It's kind of a it kind of encourages architects to create their own personalized tools in order to be able to face unique personalized design problems.
Yeah. I mean, from that explanation, I can see the connection between generative art, right? Because it seems like similar in a way. And I wonder, when did you discover generative art? Was it early on in your career as an architect, or more towards the last few years?
Okay, so I think it depends on how we define generative art, right? Because ever since I graduated from that master's degree in Barcelona, I already started working as someone that I started calling myself a creative coder. So I started working in an architectural office where I helped automating multiple architectural processes via coding, technical aspects and aesthetic aspects. I would help create programs that would generate multiple options of facade, optimizing the distribution of buildings on the site. We would also create application interfaces, not only for myself, for ourselves, but for the clients, to involve them in the design process. Then after I left Barcelona, I moved back to Warsaw and I started teaching at my own university. I was teaching programming to architects, still like, let's say, category of creating coding. And then I moved from teaching like technical aspects to teaching design studios, when I encouraged students to implement algorithmic logic in designing. I did my PhD there, and meanwhile, I also started working outside of academia for a furniture designer from the Netherlands called Joris Labman. When my role was to create programs and scripts to help him generate complex geometries that would constitute the furniture they were designing.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I can see synergies there between your art, which we'll talk in a bit, and designing like these objects, right? Like furniture, modern. I can see how that translates to what you usually create. So when you were working with this designer, or when you were teaching architecture,
Mhm.
were you already creating art on the side or not yet?
My own practice. So I would consider that my more personalized practice started after I left Warsaw and we moved to San Sebastian, because when we set up the company, the scope of the scope of projects, the spectrum of projects that we were doing was very wide. So we encompassed many things from creating applications dedicated to technological companies in the region, but all the way to creating and building interactive artistic installations in the city of San Sebastian. We had a bunch of those, and I consider that the starting point of my art practice.
Nice.
But then like the company slowly moved towards more urban scale analysis and design, and I kind of diverged towards my own practice, which was something that I felt much more comfortable with.
Nice. So you are now doing it full time?
I'm doing it for full time right now. Well, I'm still helping once in a while in the company when I know is most needed, when I like data analysis, programming something that's very very specific.
And how did you discover NFTs? And maybe another thing I'm interested is, do you like your practice, the way you release art, is it always via NFTs, or do you also have other mediums, maybe prints, maybe physical stuff? How do you define your medium or your practice?
So when I discovered NFTs, so again, I have to involve in the story Luis Fraguada. I remember one day he was visiting us in San Sebastian. We were talking about many things. I was in the phase back then when I was experimenting quite a bit with artificial intelligence. It was like 3 years ago. I was trying to train my own neural networks and playing with the results. And then we're talking about it, and Luis at one moment asked me, so what do you think about blockchain NFTs? And I was like, what are you talking about? And then he first time explained me about art on blockchain. He told me about Hackathon, and then he encouraged me to try. I remember he even sent me, helped me set up a wallet on Tezos. He even sent me 0.5 Tez so I could be able to mint something, and that's how it started. I published my first pieces. I started interacting with people on Twitter, and I absolutely fell in love with the community. And to this day, the digital format is my main medium of releasing projects. There are also, when I do something with a gallery like bright moments or verse, there is also like this in real life event that I really enjoy. But the main medium of the piece is digital.
NFTs, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned Luis Fraguada, and you're an architect. I also know Ismaelio, who
Yeah.
is another architect. He's also releasing. I think he's teaching parametric design, and he's releasing NFTs, for his art. But there are more. There are more artists, right? So
The architects in the space. That's true. There is apart from Luis and Ismael, Olga Fradina. She recently had a curated ArtBlocks drop.
yeah,
I think she's an interior designer. Galo Canizares is an architect. Luca Piskorzec, Alejandro Campos, Victor Dubal, Anna Beller. Eric's Fan is also
Yeah.
an architect. And I think Bruce from Studio York.
Yeah.
Anna Glyphic from Anavez. There's too many architects. I don't think it's that surprising because I think there's a connection between coding language and architectural language. So there is a language of architectural expression that comes from the fact that buildings need to obey certain rules. And the fact that we need foundations to start building, we need columns to support beams. When you have walls and you want to make an opening in the wall in order to transfer vertical forces from it, you're creating arcs. This led to formulating certain grammatical rules that of what elements you use and which scale, in which order. It's like for ages, these rules that were related to function, durability also led to aesthetics. So if you don't follow those rules, the language is off. And when you are working on generative art, on your coding, you're basically you're setting up a system of grammatical rules and elements that must obey those rules. I think the connection is strong. Also, I'm not sure about everybody, but some of us, I know me, Luis, Ismaelio, Luca, we come from, we are familiar with parametric architecture. So with the concept of building an algorithm that generates formal results. I think these long form generative art is very close to that.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting connection, I will say. And I would like to talk a bit about your art, Jacek, because you have released so many long form generative art through the last 2 years on Fxhash, but also, as you mentioned, on other platforms like Right Moments. Um, and Alex Historic, who is he was in the podcast recently, and he's the editor in chief of Right Click Save.
Mm-hmm.
He sent me a question. He wanted to know what you think, and it's related to some of your collections like Reborn and Unbuilt, where in this case, there are many people that are reshaping nature, right? They're playing with code to reshape nature and create different sort of outputs. But in your case, it looks like you are reshaping architecture, right? So it's kind of a different approach. And he wonders, and me too, how did you come up with these ideas of reshaping architecture?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you mentioned Reborn and Unbuilt. I think these are two releases that I published on Fxhash. That I think they are like the most visible manifestations of my architectural background. In both cases, I work with semantic rules of existing architectural languages. I don't think it's that far away from mimicking nature. You're basically extracting rules from something you observe and and you try to creatively reprocess that. So I don't know if that's visible. I don't usually hang my own frame and hang my own pieces in my own flat, but in case of Unbuilt, it's a very special piece for me. So I have a very special relationship.
Yeah, I think it was the first one I saw from you. It was one of your originals, right?
It was my second publication on Fxhash, and the one that I think kind of drew attention to of many collectors.
Yeah.
So in this one I work with the rules behind medieval sacral architecture, and then in Reborn I changed both the period and the scale from Middle Ages to Renaissance, and from the scale of a building to the scale of a city. So I think that these duo, like the Middle Ages and Renaissance, are to me were always a fascinating relationship. The transition between them is marked by, let's be honest, the Renaissance's complete disregard towards medieval legacy, to an extent that they even use the term Dark Ages to describe the part of the preceding epoch. Let's say in Reborn, on that Renaissance fascination with the concept of the ideal, like the ideal proportions of the human body, in this case ideal cities, enclosing aesthetics in mathematical rules and theories. And it's also very interesting to me that there are very few ideal cities from that time that exist today. Most of them failed spectacularly when confronted with an imperfect world. And
yeah. Oh, that's quite a unique concept, and I think there is an architect that I believe you are very familiar with, which is Zaha Hadid, who kind of pioneered, right, this idea of the methodology you mentioned earlier, parametric design, and creating spaces and the interaction between the spaces we live in. Can you tell us a bit about Zaha and how your practice has been influenced by this methodology, and this kind of process?
So yeah, Zaha Hadid is a very interesting example. She's one of the huge star architects of the late 20th and early 21st century. Enormous legacy. She was the first woman to win the Pritzker Prize, which is like the Pritzker Prize is like the Nobel Prize, or like the Oscar in architecture. She's a woman that comes from Iraq. She, before studying architecture, I think she studied mathematics. But what's very interesting about her is that her first architectural works were not buildings, but that they were paintings. So she was fascinated with early 20th century Russian avant-garde and the suprematism. And during the 80s, she created works of art, paintings that were studies of architectural and urban forms, inspired in that suprematist aesthetics and composition rules. So later she adapted the painting as preliminary form study for architectural projects. So when you look at her, mainly the especially the early projects, and you compare it to her work as a painter, you can see the similarities in the dynamics and the expression of forms.
Okay.
And then I think in the 90s she moved more towards what we call now parametric design, and it manifested in a different aesthetics. And I think when we're talking about her, it's hard not to mention another person that's related to her practice. Her professional partner that was working with her since the 90s, I think, called Patrick Schumacher. Like Zaha Hadid died in a few years ago, like 2015 or 2016. And Patrick Schumacher is now in the lead of her studio.
Okay.
And he is one of the very influential thinkers, theorists of architecture, and a lobbyist of parametric design. He proposed a concept, an architectural style that he called parametricism. So he has this opinion that when you use algorithmic methods in the process of design, then you have an obligation to use certain architectural language that is appropriate for this method. So what does he mean when he means that? So for him, like the consistent language with using computer in architecture are curvy forms, complex geometries, no right angles, no repetition. It's almost religious in his case. It's like you shall not use repetition in architectural.
What does it mean, Jacek? What does it mean, no repetition exactly?
Like repetition is Patrick Schumacher relates it to mass production, to Fordism. So when you create a building, you can prefabricate certain elements in a factory, and then you can stack them together to create a very repetitive facade. So,
like a product that you repeat. So
exactly.
It's more like a unique, needs to be unique, like each building, each construction, or each design
element of the building should be unique according to him. I don't agree with him, because the rhythm of a facade is not a sign of the time of Fordism and mass production. I mean, during the whole history since ancient orders, we can see
mass production or ways to automate.
Not only mass production, but certain rhythm, certain repetition in a facade, which is part of architectural expression. He goes from the aesthetics aesthetics manifesto all the way to his building almost like a philosophical system, where he calls for privatization and individualization of architectural processes, liberalization of housing policies. He advocates more free market economy based on that.
So he expands to many areas, not only like
I personally do not share his opinion. I to begin with, I think this relation between using digital tools and curvy shapes, no repetition, complex geometries, I think that this this relation that he makes that's necessary for him, I think it's a stretch. I think this decision is very arbitrary. And also, I don't want to bore you with different examples, but in history, there were many architects that applied generative tools and parametric tools in order not to address geometric complexity of buildings, but to, for instance, optimize the performance of the building, improve the efficiency, to ensure smart distribution of functions in the building. And I think all that, which is also part of the scope of parametric design, I think that's the most important, more purposeful way of using digital tools in architecture.
Right, and no, you're not boring us. I mean, I find it very interesting to get into the details, right, of your art, your inspiration, but also learn from all these experts, right, that you are mentioning that had a big impact on your art, but also in the world, right, in the how we design things, how we think about things. In this case, in architecture, in art. Um, that takes me to Hollow, which is probably I think it's your most how do we say, critically acclaimed collection, generative art collection. I think it marked for you kind of start a new beginning, right? Because the reception was just amazing, and the collection itself, it's truly special. It's one of my favorite collections on Fxhash. Can you tell us a bit about Hollow and the story behind it, how you created and the reception?
Yeah, so Hollow is in fact, it's both a tribute and a critique of an artist that is very important to me. I'm talking about Eduardo Chillida. Chillida was a Basque sculptor, famous for his abstract work, in monumental scale, the materiality of his sculptures. In the 1990s, he proposed a very ambitious vision of turning a whole mountain into a sculpture. He wanted to create a vast cubic void inside Mount Tindaya on Fuerteventura, on Canary Islands. It was like a huge empty cube that would open up in the corners to let natural light in, and it would form this truly breathtaking space. Almost everybody was against that project. It was criticized first of all for its ecological impact. Culturally, it was also highly controversial because Tindaya is a sacred mountain of indigenous people of Fuerteventura. Economically, because the place, in order to sustain itself, would have to become basically a massive touristic attraction. And even from the artistic point of view, like, who are you to impose your vision on a natural formation that has been there for 20 million years, right? But to me, the beauty of the concept was undeniable, and and the idea of Hollow was to give it a new life. So instead of excavating a sacred mountain, I created multiple randomly generated digital mountains, where the excavation of not of stone but of digital matter for artistic purposes seemed less controversial. And that's what Hollow is about.
Yeah, and no, that's a very interesting story. I like how your collections have, something behind them, inspired by architects, but also stories, right? That kind of happened through history. So this anecdote about, yeah, modifying mountain to create a piece of art, yeah, seems controversial, as you said, but it was a great way. I mean, I think the generative art medium was the perfect way to bring that to life, right, with Hollow. And there are some, let's call them rarities or differences between each Hollow, right? So I know that one of the or well, many of the special ones are those that have these birds, right, flying in the cave.
Oh,
So
yes.
how did you come up with that idea of the birds, and how did you actually, if we talk a little bit more technical, how did you code those? I mean, in a very short manner, how do you code those birds moving and flying? What kind of techniques do you use for that?
So it's I don't know where the idea came from. I think it was like kind of a vision that at some point struck me, that the huge empty space, you have like a flock of birds flying, it would give it a more sense of scale to the piece. It's the way I coded it is basically a flock algorithm. So like I don't code the paths of each individual birds, but each bird is like an agent, like an element of a system that's basically obeying very simple rules. It's looking at its nearest neighbors, other birds, and tries to align to them, to the direction of their flight, and also keep the distance so that they don't collide. And it has to avoid collision with the walls of this space.
Mm.
So
No, that's interesting. Yeah, no, that's quite cool. I again, congrats on that collection. It's, I think probably one of the. I mean, it's one of the top selling collections on Fxhash, but also has been included in many lists of the top people that curate, right?
I'm very, very happy with the reception it received.
And how long did it take, Jacek? Was it complicated to create this one, or was one of those that actually didn't take you so much time? How much time did you spend on this, on Hollow?
I don't have the ones that take little time. It's like I spent usually many months developing my work. I dive into coding completely. I get lost in it, and I need many weeks of experimentation and different iterations until I am happy with the piece. So I think Hollow took 4 months, maybe.
Okay, 4 months. Yeah, that's. And I remember you told me when we met in Valencia that you actually go like all into these projects, right? Like you don't stop until it's ready, right? So that means like 4 months full time working on the collection, right? So
it's sometimes a little bit obsessive. I cannot, when I dive into the process of creation, I really have problems of finding when to stop. It's basically because I don't treat my project as products that in which I just want to achieve certain objective, and then it's done. It's almost like a living organism that I coexist with during these months, and I try different things with it. I add elements to it. I remove it. I kind of enhance it with experiences that I gain parallelly in my life. It's a intensive relationship that I have with the piece.
I mean, I think that's it's, I guess, complicated, right? As you said, to when is it done, and I guess you can attach too much, like emotionally, maybe to a collection, but I think that also influences the results, right? Like it's a way to, if you treat it as a product and you didn't put that much energy into it in terms of, it should be perfect. I think that will reflect, right, in the final output. Right?
Yeah, so I really struggle with as I mentioned with finishing work on it. So
when is it ready?
When it's ready, right? So like when I start working, it's true I have certain things. It's as I mentioned, I don't treat it as a product that's already defined in my head, but I have a lot of things planned beforehand. So the topic that I want to explore, I also have certain rules of the language that I want to use, the vision, let's say the vague vision of how I want it to look. And but when I start coding, I always get surprised by the results, and I start playing along with it. And it's there's this element of discovering that I didn't have it all figured out, and it incites the excitement because I need to try to understand the new aspects of the algorithm and how it basically the process diverges from the planned path and forces me to adapt. It's almost like a dialogue with the work.
Yeah.
I treat it as I told you, more like a living being. It reflects my thoughts that I'm having during the time when I work on the piece. Usually I stop working on it when the piece stops resonating with me anymore, because I feel that I'm in a different moment mentally than when I started working on it, and then I cannot contribute anything meaningful to it anymore. And then I also always have to make a decision whether it's worth releasing it or not. But what my relation is with the piece. There are often moments when I spend weeks or months working on something that I decide not to show to the world, because I grow detached from the piece I've been working on.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, but there is that's something you can always come back at a later date.
Never done it until now. Sometimes I come back to projects that I had started, but only to take out certain elements from it. Maybe there's like a function or like an algorithm that I find useful in a different projects, and I want to explore more. But if the concept stops being close to me, it's really hard for me to come back to it fully. But maybe in the future, I will revisit some of those projects.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a great way to put it. And Jacek, we talk a bit about your generative art collections like Unbuilt, Hollow. You also released Cantera in collaboration with Bright Moments.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a bit about Cantera? What is it about, and how was that experience working with Bright Moments?
It was a really good experience. It's a project that somehow continues the exploration of that I started with Hollow. It takes a little bit further my fascination with human intervention in natural landscape, natural environment. It's more inspired. It's also inspired with the cultural landscape of the Basque country. It's called Cantera, as in the quarry. I don't know about Galicia, but in the Basque country, especially when you go to the surrounding of Bilbao, it's filled with whole mountains consumed by stone quarries. There is even a story of a town called Gallarta, which is next to Bilbao. It's a beautiful story because it's a town in which they discovered iron ore at some point, and they started extracting the iron ore, and they realized, and the city started thriving because of that. People came to the city to work in the mines. The city, the town developed, and the mine grew bigger and bigger. When they realized that the richest supply of iron ore is directly below the town of Gallarta, they started extracting the ore from beneath it, and while doing it, they needed to start destroying the town. So what happened is that the city basically came to being and gained certain importance because of the iron ore, but the discovery of it led to the destruction of the city, because in order to get to the iron ore, they needed to basically destroy the city and displace the town. The sad aspect of it is that when they when they removed destroyed the town in the 70s, I think after a few years, like 6 years later, they discovered that the extraction of iron ore, the way they were extracting it, was not economically feasible anymore, and they abandoned the mine. And it's a little bit about this relationship that we have with nature, but in the context of how this relationship with nature really affects us as human beings as well. I'm always interested in that aspect of
No, that's a very deep,
intelligence.
very rich history. I mean, that's quite interesting. I have to visit that town. I guess
There's a
visit
museum
the museum.
of,
Okay,
of mining there.
nice. And Jacek, you actually have been kind of not sure if the word is on a break, but you haven't released recently, right? Like a couple of months ago, and that probably means you've been
That's April, yeah.
since April.
Exactly.
Wow, that's almost a year. I mean,
That's almost a
close.
year.
So, what have you been up to, and is there anything coming soon?
There is. So I've been working for months already on a new piece. It's called Barbarians. Let's don't pretend you haven't seen it. I showed you
Yeah,
showed you the sneak peeks of the piece. It will be released soon with Verse in the beginning of February. I don't know where you are planning to release the podcast,
recording.
but at the beginning of February we'll present it in London with Verse, and the project will be published on their platform at the end of February, beginning of March. It's called Barbarians, and it's further exploration of this idea of human intervention in natural landscape that I started with Hollow and continued with Cantera. So Barbarians draws a scenario where, when you look at it's a long form collection, and when you look at the pieces, at first glance you can see these monumental structures carved in the landscape, in natural landscape. They look like a little bit like architectural elements, vaults and columns. They are cutting through mountains and valleys. And then when you zoom in at the terrain surrounding these structures, you can also see that there are other inhabitants of this scenery. Between those hills and the trees, you can see roads, wooden houses, sometimes like more bigger buildings resembling a church or a town hall. There are fields, and it's, when you look at that strong, let's say, monumental intervention and compare it to this more humble civilization, it's not really clear who came first. So the first thing that may come to your mind is that we are looking at the ruins of an advanced civilization where a new, less technologically advanced culture started dwelling, like barbarians in ancient Rome. But maybe no, maybe this is not necessarily the case. That maybe these monumental structures may be posterior to the wooden settlements, like a radical barbaric footprint of an external force colonizing the land for resources, maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's the same culture we're talking about.
Yeah, no, that sounds exciting. Again, another interesting story that you kind of used as inspiration. I really enjoyed those. So it will come out on Verse on February. I think. I think this episode will be live on the 1st of February. So
Perfect.
I think people will have time to actually look at be ready, be prepared to collect. Exciting. And I did look at the outputs. You share a couple, and they are looking fantastic. So congrats again, Jacek, on your amazing work and on the new collaboration. And what I like about Verse is that they do these shows in London, right? And physical shows, which is not common is very hard to find.
I really enjoy those when you get to meet people and collectors, and curators and other artists in real life.
Fantastic. And the show in London, will it be also early February or later?
It's going to be 7th of February. I think we're going to have like an in real life event in London. So I'll be there the moment we are recording it. Like in 2 weeks, I'm going to be leaving for London.
Mhm.
So the moment the episode will be aired is going to be 1 week before that, I guess.
Awesome. Exciting. And Jacek, we have been talking for, close to an hour, and I have this question I always ask guests, is to name three artists that inspire you. You already mentioned multiple, right? But if you had to have a list of three that inspire you, could be digital artists using blockchain or not. It's up to you.
It's really tough to narrow down my inspirations and reference to three people. So I definitely cannot not mention Eduardo Chillida, whom I already mentioned in the before. Although I have a very complicated relationship with Chillida. His artistic practice affected me greatly, not only in Hollow but also in my other formal experimentations. But Eduardo Chillida as a person is not a role model for me. His certain history, but that's a topic for a whole new conversation. But definitely he's one of those three. So the second person, I am always fascinated by land art. So one of the artists from this field, I will go for Maya Lin, who is a land artist, but she's also an architect.
Okay.
And the last one, El Anachui. El Anachui is an artist from Ghana. He works with sculptural installations that look like huge textile elements, and he uses everyday objects such as bottle tops to create those. They are really stunning.
Nice. That's a very, very unique list. And for everybody listening, all the links to the collections, to the artists, will be in the show notes, so you can easily find the artists Jacek mentioned and also his collections.
I will provide you with a list.
Yeah, if I need help finding them, I'll let you know. But I think should be easy. Thanks so much, Jacek. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you,
All
Carlo.
the best with your show. And yeah, I'll be watching out for the release of Barbarians. Sounds very, very exciting.
I'm also very excited, and I cannot wait for the event.
The big day. All right. Thanks so much, Jacek.
Thank you, Carlo.